This is Chick2Chick Uncut, raw and unfiltered.
Let's talk about Social Security, shall we? This is one of those subjects that is confusing, it's complicated, and sometimes, depending on who you talk to, you might get different advice, especially that age-old question, when should I start taking Social Security? That's a tough question, and you might get different answers, again, depending on who you talk to. Also, the president has been pushing hard, saying we should no longer be taxing Social Security. Plans are moving forward for that to happen. Not sure that anybody would argue with that. And here's something that some folks may not be aware of. If you are divorced, you might be entitled to your ex's Social Security. And here's the thing, they won't even know about it. Lot to talk about here with our guest, Matt Taylor. He's with Taylor Retirement Services. Matt, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
I'm excited, Flora. I've never been on Chick2Chick before.
Well, here you go. Got a lot to unpack here, Matt, a lot of complicated things to talk about, but let's just start with the basics. What is Social Security and what's the intent of it?
Well, it started with this simple premise. You pay into it during your working years and you collect from it during your retirement years. And the president was asked, will this ever be a taxable benefit? And he basically said, over my dead body. And as we know, Social Security is taxable. But he didn't lie. He told the truth because that was FDR. And the current taxation of Social Security has only been around since about 1993. And he had long since passed. So there is some taxes in certain circumstances, but there might be something you can do about it.
Yeah. So how is Social Security calculated? Again, this is for folks who have worked. What are the different factors that play into how Social Security is calculated?
Well, they want you to have 40 quarters. So that's 10 years of working. It doesn't have to be a solid 10 years, but over a 3-month time period, if you pay in at least a certain amount, I believe it's about $1,300, then you qualify for that. And once you get your 40 quarters, or if you're married to somebody who has their 40 quarters, then you can become eligible for receiving Social Security benefits.
Okay, so basically you need to work for 10 years. Also, which salary is it based on? Because clearly over those 10 years, your salary is going to fluctuate. It could go up, it could go down. So what's it based on?
Well, they do keep track of your lifetime payments into Social Security, and they take an average of your high 10. So if you're able to put a couple of extra years on there at the end with higher income, it can help bolster your benefits some.
So if you get older, or you're older, right? And this has been happening, that maybe you're in your 50s, you get laid off from a job, you might get fired from your job, and now you don't have any income, and you're worried about, oh no, my Social Security payment is going to go down. Should you be worried about that since you've already worked more than 10 years and you have your salary calculated in there?
No, you're absolutely right. You really don't need to be worried about that. Your benefit is your benefit. It's not going to be degraded because you have a few years at the end of lower income. Maybe you're working a part-time job or a job that you enjoy that just doesn't happen to pay as well. That's not going to hurt you. It's just if you're able to get a job paying more, it will help you. So only upside when it comes to that issue.
Yeah, so you really shouldn't be too concerned about that because that seems to be a trend lately. It seems like people in their mid-50s, they're getting laid off or they're getting fired from their jobs. And then they start to panic and they're thinking, I'm not ready to retire yet. And I'm afraid this is going to hurt my Social Security. So this should alleviate any fears.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that we encourage is to look at Social Security as a bonus, if you will. Really build your own financial independence by building your own 401ks or whatever the plan might be through work, or doing IRAs on your own. And that way you can look at Social Security as play money, not as I need it to get by money when it comes to retirement.
Okay, so here's a question, and there's two different parts to this. The first question is, when can I start to receive Social Security?
Well, you can start receiving Social Security because of disability pretty much at any age. A widow can start to receive Social Security at age 60, or a widower. Unfortunately, you've lost your spouse in order to collect that. Collecting for yourself, you can begin as soon as age 62. And if you want, you can delay it as long as you choose. But if you delay it beyond age 70, you're not getting any extra benefits. But between ages 62 and 70, there are some extra benefits, some extra money every month you get by delaying the start of your benefits.
So there's 3 different ages. Is it 62, 67, and 70? Is that correct?
It is. There's actually a phase in, they call it full retirement age, where if you're below full retirement age, there's a little bit of a discount to your benefit. If you're above full retirement age, there's a bit of an addition to your benefit. If you were born in 1956, your full retirement age is 66 years and 4 months. If you were born in 1957, your full retirement age is 66 years and 6 months. If you're born in 58, 66 years and 8 months. If you're born in 59, 66 years and 10 months. And if you were born in 1960 or later, then it's the 1967. So they phased it in.
Didn't I say at the beginning of the podcast, this is really complicated? Like, why don't they just have one age? Why is it 66 and 4 months, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? What is that all about?
Well, it's the government. It doesn't have to make sense. I like to say that it's a collection of individual decisions. And in case you're thinking that I'm a fountain of useless knowledge, I kind of am, but I also have a cheat sheet here.
I like cheat sheets. I have my own. That's okay. Okay,
Yeah, so we have these available for our clients. We give them out for free all year long.
I think that's really important to have. So I asked when you can start to take Social Security, and you clarified that by saying age 62. But here's the other question, and this is the big question that is complicated and confusing, and you're going to get different answers from different people. When should I actually start to take Social Security? Should I start at 62? Do I wait until full retirement, or do I wait until I'm 70?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I love that question. I think the best way to answer this, and you're right, ask 10 people and you'll get 10 answers. I think the best way to answer this is when you're well and truly fully retired, or you hit your full retirement age, which is whatever that number was, 66 and some odd months or age 67 or beyond. Now, the reason why I say that is if you're under full retirement age and you turn on your Social Security, there can be a penalty if you're still working. If you're making in excess of $23,400 a year and you're under a full retirement age and taking Social Security, for every $2 over the threshold, there's a $1 penalty. So not only did you lock in the benefit at the lower discounted rate, you're also having to pay half of it back in terms of a tax penalty. So if you are well and truly fully retired at 62, go ahead and take it at 62. If you're still working full-time and you were born after 1960, then I would say take it at 67. But you want to take it sooner versus later, in my opinion, because Social Security is not an asset. Social Security is an income. And assets like your IRAs and your 401ks, you can pass on to your kids and grandkids. Incomes, you cannot. So if you don't use your Social Security benefit, in a sense, it's lost. Now, it's not lost to your spouse, but it is lost to your kids.
Let's talk about this at great length. I love what you're saying there. I love what I just heard when you said take it at 62, because so many other people will say, wait, just wait, because your monthly benefit is going to be higher. And if you wait until you're 70, it's even going to be higher than that. But you're saying, don't wait. Very few people are giving that advice. Most people are saying, wait, and you're saying, don't wait. If you're fully retired, take it at 62. Let's talk about the benefits and all of the advantages of doing that.
Yes, I say don't wait because I would much rather you leave your 401ks and IRAs and Roth IRAs untouched and let those grow as much as possible and go ahead and turn on and use that Social Security benefit sooner versus later. I just want to caution folks against, if they're still working, turning it on before full retirement age because of that penalty. But assuming you're of full retirement age and you're making less than $23,400 a year if you're under the full retirement age, then I would say definitely go ahead and turn it on. Even if you don't need that money, bank it. put it into other investment accounts, other savings accounts, and build that asset. What the job of a certified financial planner like myself and my team here at Taylor Retirement Services is to help you own and control the maximum amount of assets that you can. And you neither own nor control Social Security. But once you receive those benefits and you put them in some type of investment or savings account, now those are assets that you do, in fact, own and control and can pass on to kids and grandkids. So that's why we say, as long as you're not working full time, go ahead and turn it on sooner versus later.
What do you say to people who say, you know what, I took it at 62, but now I'm 70 and my benefit, gosh, if I had only waited, it would have been so much higher and I regret doing that. What do you say to them?
Well, they're probably absolutely right. But there's probably also some other financial challenges that they've had along the way as well. Maybe they turned it on at 62 when they were still working and they paid half of it back in that penalty. That's certainly a mistake. Maybe they didn't do a good job investing the money that they received from Social Security in the early years, or maybe they didn't build a 401k or IRA or Roth for themselves, and they would have rather continued to work and take the benefit later. But we really focus on helping folks build their own wealth, independent of being dependent. That's not good English there, but being independent of being dependent on the government, I guess is what I was trying to say. There's got to be a better way to say that.
I got it. I understood exactly what you were saying. Is this advice, though, different depending on what situation you're in? So, for instance, I'm a single female. Would you give different advice if a married couple sat in front of you and asked you that same question?
There used to be notable differences between married folks and single folks. There are some techniques that married folks could take advantage of, and some of your listeners might be thinking of those right now. One was called suspend, where you would activate your Social Security benefit, the spouse would take it, and then the primary person would suspend theirs and let theirs continue to roll up. Unfortunately, or maybe I should say fortunately, those types of loopholes have been taken away and it's really been simplified. So there's not a whole lot of difference between single folks and married folks, other than when a married person becomes a single person because of a death. What happens is the survivor's Social Security benefit, if it's the larger of the two, remains. If the survivor's Social Security benefit is the smaller of the two, then their benefit gets bumped up to equal what their spouse's was. So essentially, the smaller of the two goes away for a married couple at first death. The larger of the two remains. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of differences between single folks and married folks.
You talked about something, and I want to go a little bit more in depth when you talked about income streams. So I was discussing this with someone who happens to be single. And I said to her, why don't you retire? What are you waiting for? You're 63. Why don't you retire? Why don't you start taking your Social Security? And she said to me, I don't want to take my Social Security yet because I want those benefits to go up higher. So then if I pass away, it will go to my kids. And I said, your Social Security does not go to your children. Can we talk about that, the differences between a married couple and who gets the Social Security, and then someone like me, I just have a son. If I pass away, he's not going to get my Social Security. So all of that money that I paid into the system for all of those years, where does that money go, Matt?
Yeah, it just goes into the general operating fund of the United States federal government. Now, some folks might be saying, well, there is a death benefit for Social Security. And that's true. It's a whopping $255. So it doesn't really make sense to deprive yourself to not take the benefits once you're well and truly fully retired, because your kids are going to get that $255 whether you started sooner or later. So go ahead and enjoy it. You had a lot of money withheld from your paycheck over the years. If you were a single person, you had 7.65% of your lifetime earnings taken for Social Security. If you were a self-employed person, you had 15.3% of your income taken for Social Security. Self-employed people pay twice as much as employed people when it comes to the taxes for Social Security. So go ahead and turn that benefit on and enjoy it. Just make sure if you're under full retirement age that you won't have more than that $23,400 a year in earned income.
I think that people forget that. And I think that people lose sight of the fact that this is your money. You earned this money. And because it was just taken out of their check over the years, they kind of forgot that this is their money. The government is not giving them money. And again, as you pointed out too, if you're self-employed, you're paying twice as much. And the president's whole mantra has been, you earned this. You deserve this. Why are you waiting to take this? Would you say, though, that when it does come to Social Security, though, that one size doesn't fit all and you really need to study what's going on in your life? You really need to take a good look at your financial health. The advice, I should say, is going to vary from person to person.
Yeah, and that's the challenge with government programs is it has to kind of be one size fits all, but we're not all the same. And there are some choices that you get to make, like when you turn it on, if you collect under yourself or a spouse or maybe even an ex-spouse. And that's something worth mentioning. If you were married long enough, more than 10 years, to somebody who earned a much higher income than you, you could collect off of their benefit, even though you're divorced. So that's an opportunity as well. And it does merit sitting down and looking at, but I also want to stress that you also want to have your own assets as well. You don't want to just rely on Social Security. Yes, it is your own money coming back to you, but you don't own it and control it like you would with having your own IRA. And taken in context with an overall financial plan, it makes a whole lot of sense to include Social Security in the decision-making process.
Yeah, and when you talked about income stream, I'm of the philosophy, I'm of the feeling that why should I touch my savings and dip into my savings or any other assets that I've built up when I can take my Social Security and use that to live off of? Because again, if I pass away, my son is not going to get my Social Security, but I can leave my savings, investments, whatever I've built up, that will go to him. But if I deplete that, he's not going to get that. And he's not going to get my Social Security. Is my thinking right? Am I on base here or am I off base?
I agree with you. The one thing that I would caution on, though, is you use the word savings, which is good. But for the most part, savings accounts are going to be earning less than 5%.
Or even IRAs or even 401ks or any other type of investment. I don't think I should touch that if I can take my Social Security. So maybe I should have been more clear about that.
I think you were very clear. I'm just being overly analytic here, which is part of the job of a financial advisor. For every year that you wait with your Social Security, you get 5% more. The idea is whatever your money is invested in, you want to be getting more than 5% in. If you're drawing down a checking account that's making, well, I saw one just yesterday, 1/10%, and you're drawing that down so as to build your Social Security benefit up, that would be an exception because you're drawing that down. It's earning very little. And this is for a younger person who has good life expectancy. But generally speaking, I absolutely agree with you. Turn it on sooner versus later. It's difficult to say always or never, especially in the world of finance, because there's always some exceptions. And that was just a real obscure exception that I gave you there. But generally speaking, absolutely. Turn it on sooner versus later.
Okay, now let's get back to that whole issue of divorce. With 50% of the marriages ending in divorce, there are a lot of divorced people out there like me. And again, certain people who are divorced are entitled to their ex's Social Security. Let's go a little bit more in depth. Let's go back to that whole issue and talk about who qualifies for that. What divorced person can get their ex's Social Security?
In order to collect on a former spouse's Social Security benefit, you would have had to have been married to that person for 10 years, and you have to have been divorced from that person for at least 2 years. You have to be age 62 or older. It doesn't really matter what age they are, as long as they're 62 or older as well. But you yourself also have to be 62 or older. You have to be unmarried, but you can have been married and then re-divorced. And I came across that just recently, where a lady was divorced for the second time, and her first husband was very high income. Her second husband was okay income, and she was no income. She was a stay-at-home mom. So we looked at getting her benefits based off of her first husband, and the real shocker was only a $50 a month difference, because Social Security actually has a large, I don't know what I want to call it other than equalizing effect, where people who pay in a little actually get a lot more back than what they put in, and people who put in a lot, they get a very little bit of what they put in, and the difference between somebody get a lot in Social Security and little isn't as much as you might expect. I was thinking that she would get several $100s a month more, but it was only $50 a month more based on the other spouse.
So what's the formula for that? And let's use $1,000 as an example. Let's pretend my monthly payment is $1,000 and my ex's monthly payment is $1,500. What's the formula there? Do I actually get the whole $1,500? How does that work?
You would get roughly half of what your spouse's benefit is. So whether you're married or divorced, you can receive your own benefit or you can receive half of your spouse's benefit. The reason why
whichever is greater. So in what the example that I just used, I'm just going to take my own benefit at $1,000 because if his is $1,500, half of that is $750. I don't want that.
Exactly. Yes. And the reason why I say roughly half is there's some fixed expenses that get deducted from your Social Security benefit for Medicare. So if you add back in the Medicare premiums, then it is the 50% of your spouse or ex-spouse or 100% of your own. It doesn't exactly look or feel like that, though, because of the fixed cost of the Medicare premiums.
So what if I'm 62 and I'm collecting Social Security and my ex is 63 and he's not collecting Social Security? Am I still entitled to his benefit?
My understanding, and the rules have adjusted a little bit on this, and I haven't personally done this since the rules adjusted, but yes, that you can still do that because you are divorced. But if he is, if you're still married to him, then no, he would have had to have activated his.
Okay. And here's a big one, because now I'm in a great situation. My ex and I, we get along great. We don't have any problems, but I know with a lot of divorced people, there's a lot of animosity going on. If somebody is in that situation and, and we keep using women as example, this also applies to men who are divorced, right? I mean, if a man's been married and they're divorced and he doesn't remarry and his wife was making more money, he's entitled to her benefits, her Social Security as well, correct? This
Absolutely.
Isn't just a female thing. This is divorced people. It's for men and women. But, a lot of people, there's a lot of animosity there. If hypothetically I had animosity with my ex and I tried to get his benefits, would he even know?
No, he would not know. And I've been in some situations where there's the belief of animosity. And what has been interesting is some communication has occurred between the exes where they said, just in case you were wondering, I'm going to, and the ex, surprisingly, is actually very happy about it because nobody really likes paying taxes and you want to get your maximum tax dollar. So unless the spouse is extremely unusually angry, they're typically going to be happy that you're getting more money.
And here's another question. Hypothetically, well, it isn't hypothetical. I am divorced. My ex is remarried. Hypothetically, if I am entitled to his benefits, does it affect his new wife's benefits if something were to happen to him? This is big, and I think we need to address that.
Oh, that's a great question. No, her benefits are her benefits, provided they were married that 10 years. He passes away, she'll get 100% of his benefit then is her benefit going forward, and it won't affect your benefits.
Yeah, so it doesn't affect them at all. And what is the philosophy behind that? Why did the government decide that divorced people, who've been married for 10 years or more should be able to tap into their ex's Social Security? Why did they even do this?
Well, I think if you're willing to put up with Matt or Flora for at least 10 years, then they figure that spouse is working.
That's your payoff, huh?
That's right. It's your consolation prize.
Seriously, what's the whole philosophy behind that?
Well, I mean, a lot of these rules date back to 1932, 1933, 1934. So I wasn't around to be privileged to those conversations. And divorce was pretty uncommon back then. The number of marriages that fell apart was about the same percentage, though, but it was because of death, simple infections, childbirth, things like that. There was a high turnover because of death. So they didn't really think a whole lot about divorce, but it did exist, and they wanted to make sure that it was taken care of. So it's always seems to have been something considered, even though it wasn't very common back then. It is more common now. There's always been a lot of what ifs because people are people and not everybody's lives are the same.
Right. And I guess they're trying to make sure that the spouse maybe that didn't earn as much money, maybe she was a stay-at-home mom or whatnot, that she's going to have money to get her through retirement. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. As a society, America very clearly decided back in the Great Depression that they didn't want to see people starving to death on the streets. And they wanted to make sure there were at least a basic level of support for folks during their retirement years to be able to pay their rent and buy food. It wasn't designed to also then have discretionary income for travel and for gifting and for nights at the theater. They wanted to make sure that your basic living expenses could get covered. So they've always had some type of benefits for surviving spouses, spouses who don't work, divorced spouses, because America doesn't want to see that hardship.
Couple of questions here as we wrap things up. The president now talking, we shouldn't be taxing Social Security. If you had a crystal ball, what do you think's going to happen? You think that's going to go through?
That would be really cool.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
It was supposed to be a tax-free benefit.
Yeah.
And FDR promised that. And when FDR promised that, the expectation was there would be 17 people paying in for every one person collecting. And now we're at a ratio of about 2.5 people paying in for every one person collecting. So the demographics have shifted dramatically. So it's much more difficult now to do that. But with this whole Doge thing, oh my goodness, it looks like they might actually be able to end enough fraud that they could get rid of the tax on Social Security and not have it affect the cash flow of the government. It's almost like all of the tax that people have been paying on their Social Security goes to all of these things that I personally did not vote for. I don't want to alienate anybody by calling it fraud. We're all Americans and we all love freedom and opportunity. But these things that I hear about what our government's spending money on are not things that I want to vote for or spend money on. For years, I've thought, how wonderful would it be if on our tax return, we could vote what our money went towards?
I'd love that.
How much towards seniors? How much towards public schools? How much towards military? How much towards NASA? How great would that be?
That would be fabulous.
Yes.
And how much fraud that would cut out.
Yes.
Here's the $1 million question. Do you really need $1 million to retire? That's what we hear all the time. You need to have $1 million in assets before you can retire. Is that true?
Well, I would say no. I can think of folks who $1 million would not be enough because they spend. And I know folks who $1 million would be 10 times more than they need. I know some folks who have small farms, and my goodness, they can live on practically nothing because they're so self-sufficient. Also, we've got a lot of folks here who work for the state and for the Fed, and they have very nice pensions. Also, school teachers get exceptionally nice pensions compared to what their salaries are. So you don't need as much. But if you're living in a high expense place like New York City and you don't have a pension, then $1 million is not enough. But here in Central PA, what we found is if you are a retired teacher or from the state or from the Navy base or the New Cumberland base, $300,000 could be more than adequate. It really comes down to your situation, and that's something that we can help you figure out. whether or not you've got enough already for retirement.
Yeah. And if people want your advice, they want to get in touch with you, that they need your help for retirement planning, how can people get in touch with you, Matt?
Well, we'd love to hear from anybody who's interested in bettering themselves financially and getting to and through retirement with increased peace of mind. We really focus on the 60 to 75-year-olds. That's where we're best. And you can get in touch with us by calling 717-232-5808. That's 717-232-5808. You can check out our YouTube channel. We've got a bunch of really good educational YouTube videos. Just type Taylor Retirement Services into the search engine and you'll see them as well. So give us a call, 232-5808, or send me an email, matt@taylorretirementservices.com.
What's your website, Matt?
The website is taylorretirementservices.com.
Very easy. Matt, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I think we covered a lot. I'm sure there's a lot more we could have talked about, but I do think we hit on some really important topics, and I think we hit on some great issues. And thanks for clearing things up for us.
Well, thank you for having me. It was fun. I hope I get invited back and we get to talk about other things as well in the future.
If you behave, I'll bring you back on. How's that sound?
Well, that'll be tough.
All right. Thanks so much, Matt Taylor from Taylor Retirement Services. Again, Social Security, very complicated issue, but you really need to know the facts, crunch the numbers, figure out what's best for you. And you heard it right from Matt. Don't wait. This is your money. You earned it. You deserved it. And if you're in the right place, start taking your Social Security at 62. Loved having you tune into the podcast today. Do me a favor, head over to our YouTube channel, Chick2Chick USA, like and subscribe. That way, every time we come out with a new podcast episode, you'll get an alert. Again, head over to our YouTube channel, Chick2Chick USA. Thanks for tuning in and have a great day.